So let's talk about color theory and why do we need it? So we need it when unwanted underlying pigment is exposed. An underlying pigment is what lives below the surface of the hair, which is these colors. And as soon as you add lightener to your neutral base color or warm base color, these are the colors that live underneath that are going to be exposed. Also, when you're doing gray coverage with permanent color, it can also be exposed if you choose the wrong level. If you choose to lighten, or if you lighten accidentally with permanent color, these are the colors that will be exposed depending on where your starting point is. So we need it so that we know when to neutralize and cancel out colors that we don't want to see. Because at these levels, depending on which level you're at, your underlying pigment is going to be something specific. So you need to learn at what level is what underlying pigment. So when you go from dark to light, levels meaning how dark or light something is, undertone meaning underlying pigment, and then you'll see corrective over here, but we'll talk about that in a second. So if you are doing highlights on somebody and they want to be a caramel color, well, we know that caramel has some yellow and some orange in it, so you're going to need to lift them to an 8. So understanding what lives below what level will also help you know what number level to lift someone to get what color, because you understand when you put two colors together what happens. It makes it a different color. So underlying pigment is going to be these colors over here where it says undertone, these colors here. So depending on what level you're at will depend on what lives underneath it. You will also see these during high lift colors as well. High lift is when you're using something that's stronger than a permanent color, but it's not quite as strong as a lightener. You need to know what level you're starting from to help formulate. So if, let's say that you misjudge on your high lift color and you think that someone is a 5 and they're really a 3. Let's say they're really a 3. So let's say that you choose this guy right here, NA. It says on there that it's 4 bases 5 through 7. So let's say that you go, oh yeah, that's a 5, but it's really a 3. It's not going to have enough cancellation to get rid of the warm tones from a level 3. So let's say that you put this on with 30 or 40 volume. You're going to get 3 to 4 levels of lift. If you're starting at a 3, you're going to go up 1, 2, 3. So you're going to get up to a level 6, possibly to a level 7. Your underlying tones are going to be red, orange, or orange. And A is typically a blue violet. So if we look at level 6, we actually need a blue green. For a blue violet to actually work to neutralize what we have, we would have to have lifted to a level 8, which would have been feasible had we started off at a level 5. So if we truly were a level 5 and we didn't misjudge it, we would get 1, 2, 3 levels of lift. We would be up to a level 8, and blue violet would be plenty to tone out a level 8. But since we misjudged what our starting level was, and it's actually a 3, and we go up 1, 2, 3 levels, 3 to 4 levels, you're going to get a 6 or a 7, and blue violet is not enough tone to neutralize these two colors. So you're still going to see a lot of warmth after the fact. So it's really important to get your level finder out if you're not certain on your levels yet and what they look like. It's just a good practice to be in. So let's talk a little bit about the color wheel. The color wheel is important because we need to know what colors mix together to make what colors. So you're starting out with primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And then you're going to mix those two colors together and make a secondary color. So our secondary color is red plus yellow equals orange. Another secondary color would be green. Blue, yellow and blue makes green. Red and blue makes violet. And then you see these little circles, and those are tertiary colors. And that just means a third color, because we started with our first color, we have our second color, and now we have our third color. So when we mix blue and green together, we get blue-green. When we mix blue and violet together, we get blue-violet. When we mix red and violet together, we get red-violet. We mix red and orange, we get red-orange. We mix yellow and orange, and we get yellow-orange. The reason that these are important to know is because on this side of the color wheel that's visible to you, that's not covered up by my hand, those are called warm tones, and a lot of our underlying pigment tones are going to be in those families. On the other side are cool tones, ash tones predominantly, and those are going to be our corrective tones, and that fixes or neutralizes, whatever word you'd like to use, neutralizes these colors here. And the way that the color wheel works is whatever two colors are directly opposite from each other neutralize each other. So purple and yellow neutralize each other, and they make brown to tan. The reason I say tan is because typically if you're wanting to neutralize yellow, that's going to be a blonde, and tan is a lighter form of brown. So yellow and purple make brown. Blue and orange neutralize each other, and they make brown. Red and green neutralize each other and make brown. And there are also tertiary colors that neutralize each other. Blue-violet and yellow-orange neutralize each other. Now we have red-orange and blue-green. Those neutralize each other. Red-violet and yellow-green neutralize each other. So if you understand which colors neutralize other colors, you are in a great position to give your guest what they want. And I think you need to practice neutralizing colors on swatches so that you understand how much pigment is necessary to neutralize the color and how much neutralization you want. So let's talk a little bit about neutralization. So on the scale of warm to cool, you have warm, warm neutral, neutral, neutral cool, and cool. So on the spectrum of warm to cool, you have these colors in between, right? So when you're going to tone out a blonde, for example, and let's say that you are starting from your underlying pigment, right? Our underlying pigment, which is these warm colors here. So let's say that you lift her to a yellow, right? Yellow requires violet. Regardless of how light yellow it is, it's still going to require a violet. So let's say that we want to get to a cool color. We can't get there with one toning service. Typically one toning service will get you to neutral, and then you can use another toning service to either get to neutral, cool, or cool, depending on what your end result is. Some people want super, super icy, or they want gray. So if someone wants gray, you have to get all the yellow out of the hair first, because typically most grays live with these ash families. So grays can be violet-based, blue-based, or green-based, and most blondes don't want a greenish color. So if we start at, let's say that we start at yellow, and let's say that we tried to jump to gray in one toning service. If gray colors are predominantly blue, blue-violet, green, let's say that we go for something that's more of a steely blue color, right? Let's say that we go for this nice gray right here, this 9B. It's beautiful, but what do we know to be true? Yellow and blue together. So if we have our yellow blonde hair and we put our blue, our 9B on there because that's the color we want, we need to understand that yellow and blue make green every single time. So if we want it to look like that blue swatch, if we try to keep putting it on our blonde hair, we're gonna get green every time. So we need to take the yellow out of the equation. That's why you have to tone twice. So in your first toning service, you go from a warm yellow to a neutral. And then in your second toning service, that's when you can put the blue on to get that gray color, and then you'll be at cool without being green. So that's how color theory works. You need to understand which colors do what to what other colors. So this image is something you need to burn into your memory, or keep a color chart out for you to reference and look at the color chart and look at the color wheel on the color chart until you have it memorized. You should have levels and undertone memorized, and you should have this memorized too. You need this chart and this chart need to be burned into your memory, because that's going to help you if you understand and you know for a fact that these make brown, these make brown, these make brown. You'll know what to mix together when you're in a situation when you're correcting something, or even just toning out an unwanted color that they don't want to see. So brown actually lives on the color wheel, but they don't put it on there. Brown actually lives right in the middle. And we already talked about what colors make brown. When you neutralize a warm color with a cool color, it makes brown in the middle there. So let's talk about how to figure out what we're left with, because that's part of formulation, is knowing what colors go together and what they make, right? And what the end result will be. So let's say that I'm going to show you how to write out the tones so you can figure out what you're left with. So let's say that you are lifted to a level 8, but let's say that you misjudge it and you go, oh, that's a 9. That's definitely a 9. It's way too yellow to be an 8, but there's still if there's still orange present, it's definitely an 8. So let's say that you go, no, that's a 9. It's a 9. And at 9, toning out pigment, we're toning out yellow. So yellow needs violet, and that's how you neutralize it. But there's this other color that we didn't see, or just misjudged or miscalculated. So if we neutralize the yellow, we're going to be ending up with a tan to the brown color. But what you're going to see is that there's going to be orange left, because the violet didn't do anything to the orange, because that's not the color that cancels out orange. Violet cancels out yellow, and blue cancels out orange. So we need a blue violet. We need violet for the yellow, and we need blue for the orange. We need violet and blue together, blue violet. So if we don't have that blue, what we're going to end up with is an orangey tan or an orangey light brown color that nobody wants. So when you're looking at what to do, it's really important that you don't misjudge what level you're at, right? So let's do another one. Let's do, instead of cancellation, let's make additives. So let's say that you have someone that wants to be a strawberry blonde, and you're starting off at a level 9, which undertone at a level 9 is yellow, right? So on the color wheel, if we want to make a strawberry blonde and we have yellow, but we want to get to here or here, what do we need to mix with the yellow to make a copper color? Because strawberry blonde is a very light, soft, coppery color. So I'm going to say it's going to be orange to yellow orange. So red and yellow make orange, or you could do yellow and orange, make a yellow orange. A yellow orange, the more yellow there is in something, the lighter it's going to appear. So if she wants a very light blondish, warm blondish color, go ahead and do yellow orange. If she wants more of a copper tone that's slightly deeper, then we're gonna go for an orange. So let's say that we're going for orange. So we know that these two colors mix together to make orange. So we're missing a red, right? Because we need to make copper. That's assuming that you don't have any copper in stock. So you could use a lower level copper should you choose to, but it might feel slightly hollow when you're done. And hollow just means it doesn't look rich. It doesn't look like a believable color. It looks kind of artificial and not realistic looking. It's just like a cartoony version of a color, just not natural looking. So let's say that we're going for a natural copper, and let's pretend that we don't have any copper and we have to make a copper, right? So we're gonna mix yellow and red. In our color books, yellow is also called gold. Gold is another word for yellow. So we know that we need to mix gold and red to equal orange or copper. Copper is a nice way of saying orange, because most clients don't come in and say, I want orange hair. They come in and they say, I want copper, or I want copper blonde, strawberry blonde, something like that. So this is how we're gonna make orange, is we're gonna mix gold and red and get a copper. Keep in mind, how much red you add into your formula is gonna be how punchy your copper is and how deep it is. So if you are looking for something lighter, like the yellow orange that we talked about, you could mix something different. So let's say that you wanted a yellow orange. You're gonna mix yellow and orange. So this is gold and copper. So, and this is gonna be a yellow orange. So that's blonde, like a blonde copper color. If you decide that you need to go from, let's say that you decide that you lifted a little too light, right? And we lifted to a 9, and we want to be a redhead, right? A redhead is technically orange or yellow orange. So an orange lives at a level 7. So if we lifted to a 9, but we really need to be to a 7, anytime you're going 2 levels this way, down, darker, you need to fill. And the reason being is, let's say that we have a 9 and we just go in and we put our level 7 orange on that. Because we're putting it on something that's yellow, it doesn't have these underlying pigment in there. It's missing, right? Because we lifted past it. So we lifted to a yellow. So all that's in the hair is yellow. So if we want to go 2 levels or more, we have to fill. So our fill color is going to be yellow orange, because that's what's missing, right? I know that can be kind of confusing. So if we're starting at a yellow, right, and we want to jump all the way down to orange, the one we're missing some background pigment to make that color believable. So what we're missing is yellow orange. So we're going to fill with a yellow orange, and then from there we can decide how much warmer or cooler we want to go. So when you're filling, you want to fill 1 level above your end result, your desired result. And the reason for that is because you want to be able to have the most control over your end result, your end color, and how much warmth or how much cool tones are in it. So when we're filling and going dark, we need to add in whatever color is 1 level above our end result. So if our end result is an orange, we need to fill to a yellow orange. So we're going to fill with an 8, let that process for 20 minutes. We're going to use Shades EQ because it's a non-permanent color, it's acidic, and it actually helps the integrity of the hair. But you know, typically putting permanent color to fill is not the best way to go about it, because the hair is already, the cuticle's already open. So we only need to darken, we don't need to lift, which is what permanent color is going to do. Permanent color opens the cuticle. If we've highlighted, the cuticle's already open and we don't need to do that. So in this case, since we're only going darker, we're only toning, we can use a non-permanent color. Demi or semi is what you're going to go to. So first we're going to fill it to an 8, and then we're going to assess how the color took. Is it warm enough or is it too neutral? That gives you the option of adding in more warmth if you need it. So being able to add more warmth instead of, let's say that we just jumped straight to a 7, what can end up happening is it can look very neutral instead of warm like we're wanting, right? Because we're making a yellow orange. So we want to make sure that we fill in those underlying tones that are missing, which is one level above, yellow orange. Let's do another filling exercise. Let's say that we're starting off at a 9. And we want to go down to a 4. It's a little more challenging. There's a lot more underlying tones that are missing here. So if we're starting from a 9, 2 levels from a 9 is going to be a 7. We're going to tone to a level 7 first, okay? And we want it to be nice and orange. Like, you want to be able to tell your guests what's going to happen before it happens so that they don't get scared during this portion of the coloring service, because you have to tone twice. So what they're going to see is underlying pigment colors, and they're going to panic a little bit. So it's our job to tell them on the front end during consultation that you might see some colors during the process that you don't care for, but that's part of filling in the hair, and those colors will be covered towards the end, but you will see them, so don't panic. So we fill to a 7. And then we're gonna fill, if our desired level is a 4, we're gonna fill to a 5, depending on what end result she wants. So first we fill to a 7, we see how that color decided to process in the hair. And then from there we are missing, so we fill in orange, and from there we are missing red. So we need to fill in, if your orange comes out like a brown, you're gonna need to add more orange in, because the lower you go on the levels, when you start to look at, like, let's say that we put a 4N, there's a lot of blue in a 4N. And if we don't have enough orange to counteract that blue to make the brown, it's gonna be greenish. So we are gonna fill to a 5, and that's gonna be red. And we're gonna process for 20 minutes if you're using Shades EQ. And we're gonna see how that processed. If the end result is more neutral, and let's say that it came out pretty warm, meaning like she looks like a redhead now, and there's not a lot of brown in it, and it's very, very red. Because we have one more level to go, you have the opportunity now to cool it down. And let's say something on the opposing end happened. Let's say that we filled to a level 5 with red, and let's say that it looks more brown than red, and we wanted a warm result. We still have one more level to add the warmth back in. So let's say that we add the red, and it just looks like a flat neutral brown, but it's not quite as dark as we need it. Then our next formula is going to be at a level 4, and we're going to add some more warmth back into it so that it doesn't go green. So we can add, we can choose colors that have warmth built into them, like in Shades EQ, that would be the WG family. The WG family. So you can use a 4WG if you need to warm up your formula. Or let's say that your end result needs to be warmer. You can also add in a CB if you need to. That's red orange. So that can be added in with your 4N to make it a slightly more balanced color. And that's why we need color theory. We need color theory so that when we understand, when we fill, when we're adding two colors together, what does the end color look like? Well, your end color is basically half of whatever your undertone is and half of what you're putting on it. So let's say that we're neutralizing, right? Half of what you're starting with. So if we're starting with a warm, right, we'll say a yellow, and let's say that we only tone a little bit of the tone out and we end up at a warm neutral. Some people like a golden honey highlight. So we need to understand that not all people need the same amount of neutralization because they have different wants for their hair and different colors look good on them. So, and there are some people where, let's say that you're highlighting off of a redhead and she still wants to look like a redhead when she's done, but with highlights running through it. You're gonna leave them on the warm side because warm neutral can look flat on a redhead because the highlights should match in color with everything else that's going on in the hair. Like you wouldn't have a predominantly warm orange base color and put on a cool ashy highlight. It's going to look out of place and even borderline green next to that orange hair. So typically you want to put two colors together that go with each other. So let's do another exercise where we're writing out colors and tones. So let's put it here. So let's say we are enhancing tones. Enhancing means if you're starting off warm, you're adding more warmth to it. Neutralization and cancellation means you're cooling it off. You're not enhancing, you're going on the opposite side of the color wheel. So let's say that we are enhancing. That means if we start with a yellow, we are enhancing it and making it warmer with some of these colors, depending on whatever our end result, desired result is. So let's say we are starting with, let's make a redhead. So let's say that we're doing gray blending and we need to make a low light that matches in with a redhead. We need an element of gold, we need an element of copper, and we need an element of brown. Because if we just have orange and copper together, it's not going to stay in the hair for very long, and it's also going to look artificial. Depends on who you're working on, but most redheads want to look natural and believable. So I have some favorite colors in shades EQ that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the GB family. The GB family. And we're going to talk about the WG family. So let's put these together so you can kind of see. You can see that like one is slightly more orangey and one is slightly more brown. So it tells you here that this is warm gold tones, brown to tan background with yellow and orange. This is brown to tan background, gold, mauve. So mauve is another word for violet, purple. So the fact that there's purple in this, that's why it has a slightly more brown appearance, because gold is yellow, right? And mauve is purple. So if you put yellow and purple together, you put yellow and purple together and you get some neutralization, which is why we see a slight brown tone to it. So we have our brown, we have our orange, and we have our yellow. So now you want to decide, based on your swatches that you're looking at, how much of what color do you want to see? So on some people, I'll just use GB, because let's say that they already have enough orange in their hair. Great, then I don't need to add any more. GB is great because it's got a little bit of brown in it and it softens it. Let's say that their hair is too brown, right? Let's say that it's way too brown and we want to see a lot more copper. You can either use C or CC. CC is very bright and punchy, and I would typically not use it as the bulk of my formula, but more like an additive. So like a quarter or less, And in some cases, I'll use a capful. So let's say that we don't want that much punchiness. We take it out and we realize that's just too much for what we're wanting. So now we're gonna look at the regular copper family, and it's a little bit lighter, a little bit less pigmented. So then you're gonna decide what level you need to be at. So let's say that this redhead is somewhere around level 7, because that's typically where orange lives, right? Is that level, orange lives at level 7, right here. So let's say that they're at a level 7. So we're gonna formulate, we are gonna look at these tones next to what they already have and decide which one's deep enough. So I'm probably gonna go for a level 6 WG. Keep in mind that Shades EQ is more translucent or see-through, like transparent, than other color lines. So even at a level 6, it's not gonna feel like a level 6. And then let's say that I use an 8 GB, right? We have to make our 8 GB. A 7 and a 9 makes an 8 if you use equal parts. So let's say, let's write out my formula, right? So let's say that I write out the colors I know I want first, and then I write out the amounts. That's how I formulate. So if I know I want a 6 WG, and then we're gonna do 8 GB, and that's gonna be a 7 and a 9. And then we're gonna use, let's say that I only want like a little bit of copper. I want it to look more like a soft version of red. I don't want it to look like highlighter orange, okay? I want it to look more natural and soft and pretty. So we can use, I'm gonna use the level 7 because there's slightly more pigment to it, but I'm gonna use less of it. So we're gonna use a 7C. Now from here, this is where I decide how much of each thing am I going to have. So 6 and 8 makes a 7. So, and I want to be at a 7. So I'm going to do equal parts of these two. So let's say that my formula is 2 ounces, right? Typically for a glaze it would be, because you're covering the whole head. So we'll say like at shoulder length hair, collarbone length hair, we need 2 ounces for our formula. So then we're gonna think about that. So we could do 1 ounce and 1 ounce. So we'll do 1 ounce of 6 WG plus 1 ounce 8 GB. It's also good to keep this number at something that's easy to split in half, because we have to do half and half to make the 8. So we can do 0.5 and 0.5 of each of those colors to get to a full ounce. And now I'm just going to use the 7C as an additive. So I'm just going to do 0.2 of an ounce of 7C. And that's going to be my formula. So that's typically how I formulate. When we're talking about gray coverage, this is a little bit different than that. This is gray blend. This can be used as gray blending if they still have a lot of their natural color left, like 25% gray or less. This can be used because it will blend out the gray. It doesn't completely cover it, but it blends it out really well for a lot of people, depending on their hair type and hair texture. Hair texture that's highly porous doesn't hang on to it quite as long. And that can sometimes cause problems for people. So if that's the issue, if you're using Shades EQ for gray blending and it's not holding on, then you can go ahead and switch to a different color line. I would switch to whatever color line has the colors in it that you want. So you could use Shades EQ Cream, it's a demi, or you could graduate to permanent color. So let's say that we're doing a gray coverage client with permanent color, right? Use that book. So you're gonna pull out your book and you're gonna identify what level they currently have growing out of their head, and then you're gonna identify what level the ends are, and you're gonna try to figure out if it's faded or not, because most of the time people will come in and they'll be slightly faded, and some people at the end of summer will be extremely faded. So let's look at this. So let's say that we have a client who is 50% gray or more, right? But she's still got some of her own pigment in her natural hair. She's got some dark gray, some light gray, and some white, we'll say. So for her, if she wants to be a redhead, if we decide to just jump to, we'll say like this color here, the NCRs, do you see how bright those are? They don't look supernatural to me. And if she wants a natural color, we can use that as an additive like we did with our 7C, but it's not going to be the bulk of our formula. The bulk of our formula for a redhead is going to be yellow, orange, and neutral. So let's look for NGC. So I feel like this color, these two colors are more in line with a natural redhead. But if someone wants to be slightly punchier and brighter and more vibrant than a natural redhead, then I would use this as your base. This has yellow, orange, and neutral. So N stands for neutral, gold, copper is what this is. So it has actually all three colors that we need. We need yellow, orange, and brown. It has all three, which is wonderful. So now you have to figure out what her base color is, like her natural growing in, and what level of depth it is. Because let's say that she's actually a 6 and we go, oh, she's a 7, 8, whatever. Yeah, that's what it is, 7, 8. And we put a 7, 8. We put a 7, 8 on a 6. What's going to happen is it's going to lift. If you use 20 volume, you can lift up to 2 levels, and you're going to actually expose some underlying tones in the gray, because anybody that's got darker gray, like that's not white yet, has pigment still left in the hair. So let's look at these. So like these gray tones here, they still have pigment left in the hair. You can see the dark pieces moving through. Those pieces have pigment left in them. They just look ashy on the surface or cool toned on the surface, but there is underlying pigment living underneath it, and that's the important part. So if you miscalculate your starting point, she's a 6 and you say that she's an 8, you're going to end up lifting her up to an 8, and you're going to expose even more warm colors. So you're going to be adding yellow and orange to something that's already yellow and orange, and you're going to get something that's called a hot root. And a hot root just means it's extra bright, extra warm, but only in the heat zone. And nobody wants that. So if that's the case, and you get extra hot at the heat zone, you're going to need to put a neutral over it, because that's orange. You're seeing orange, so you're going to need to put a brown over it, because you're going to want an orangey brown result anyway. So if you're one level lighter than where you should be, go ahead and deepen it down by a level and just use a neutral, and that will help you get to the right level and the right tone. Let's say that you are just doing, let's talk about some other things that can happen during gray coverage. Some people with white hair that are 100% white, when you go to put a neutral on them, they actually turn green, which is a wild thing to see. And not everybody does that, but what you will find is somebody might come into you as a new guest and their hair might have a slight green tinge to it. Like it looks neutral, but slightly greeny. So the reason for that is typically neutral colors, they have all of your primary colors in there, your yellow, red, and blue. What happens is the color that we put on their hair onto white hair, it grabs exactly what's in that formula. So if it's a double dose of neutral, like a 7NN, that's meant for covering gray, on that person that goes slightly greenish, we need to add something else in so that we end up looking neutral or even slightly on the warm side, because most colors have that appearance for the most part. So let's say that they do come out slightly greenish. So you can put in a little bit of NGC, but it's not going to be the bulk of your formula. I would start out with 3 parts of your neutral and then 1 part of your this color, which is yellow orange. That's going to help with that greenish color because it will help counteract the blue that's in the neutral. So it's going to help your color look more balanced and well-rounded and natural, which is exactly what most people want. When it comes to formulation, remember your end result is half of what is on the hair and half of what you're putting in the hair. So your end result, it gets easier to visualize what your end result will be if you practice on swatches. Take colors that you're afraid of and put them on swatches to see what they look like, and put them on different color swatches so you can see what happens when you add different colors together and what your end result will be.